What's up, guys? Welcome back to the infamous project. We are working on the 92 yellow Dutch car today, and I'm going to be doing a video that I've been talking about for a while. Now, if you guys remember, I did a video of installing a head unit, an aftermarket head unit, in a Fox. In fact, it was in the Cali Coupe, and I showed how to install it without wrecking or drilling your center console. Now, we're not always in those fortunate enough situations where our console is still original and hasn't been drilled, and we end up with something like this. All right, the old infamous stereo installation plate from Crutchfield and nowadays Amazon or whatever it might be. Different variants of this guy. One like this, which is ultra old school. There was the option, I think, later on to get a little pocket so that you had a factory look and feel. But the end result was you had something that was an add-on, a bolt-on into your factory interior, making it look, well, not as factory. So this Clarion head unit and install faceplate, in fact, came out of this car, which means I've got 4 holes in my center console. We can see here's our holes, and not the nicest thing to look at. And I want to upgrade the stereo to something even more old school / period correct. But you can see we got all the old wiring here, and they cut the connector, unfortunately, but it is what it is. That's what people did back in the day. We got to remember, even Celine cut harnesses, and they used like the shittiest of butt connectors when they wired their stereos up, and technically that was a dealer or factory optioned car. So we really can't blame anyone. It's just kind of the name of the game and the way that things have gone. And here is some of my old school nostalgic stuff that I was referring to. So not too long ago, I picked up this Sony MDX C6500X. So this is actually a mini disc head unit of a later vintage, right? The old Explode, right? Red and black, and not a bad looking head unit. In fact, I could still go this route. However, I did pick up another MDX 400 4-disc mini disc changer. That's right. Inside here, when you flip this face down, you can hold 4 of these. Now, some of you guys might know what these are. Some of you guys might have no idea, but this head unit is actually a pretty badass unit from back in the day. You can see the copper chassis there. It's got its own pre-out unit here. So that way you can pretty much run this all the way to the trunk, and you've only got one set of RCAs that you need to get to the front, to the head unit itself. All your other pre-outs live off of this guy. So this guy does not have a built-in amplifier. You need to run an amplifier in order to run it. And well, that's the name of the game back in the day when you had really high-end stuff. You can see I've got a set of 3.5-inch MB Court speakers there. And that's because all the speakers in this car are in fact MB Court. We got them in the mirror location here, and we got a pair, 5 1/4, and I think those are, might be like a 4-inch two-way speakers in the doors. So I want to be able to get the 3.5s in the dash. I'll be getting rid of this digital voltage gauge that's sitting here. But first things first, let's get at repairing the center console. Now, if you guys don't want to repair the center console, you don't want to go through this, or maybe the frame's cracked and it's got other issues, then you can always opt to go to LMR, and you can actually buy a brand new center console assembly, right? The whole frame, kit and caboodle, like this one right here. So this is a brand new center console frame from LMR. Okay, I've already dyed this in Color Bonds 338, and you can see there, no holes. Okay, and it actually comes with all of the mounting bracket and hardware. Some guys don't have these anymore. Some people tried to do weight reduction or whatever the hell it is, and these get thrown away, tossed away. And there's an important part to that, because there's actually a U bracket down on the bottom that this screws to on your transmission tunnel that ultimately keeps things from rattling and gives a little bit of strength and sturdiness to this otherwise pretty thin plastic that the center consoles are made out of. So if you guys have a bad center console frame, you can 100% get one of these from LMR. And I know I knock LMR quite a bit, guys, but this is actually a really nice piece, and it does everything that it needs to do, with the exception of if you're a pre-90 car that might have the fuel door release, you're gonna have to drill out that hole so that you can get that button in there. So that is an option. And in fact, I cleaned, prepped, and painted that one because I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna throw that in the car. But then I was thinking, I'm like, the center console in this car is mint already, minus those holes. So why don't I just take out the center console, we'll repair the holes, and we'll have the original piece to the car in the car. And I got to take this one out anyways if I wanted to install the new one. So why wouldn't we do it that way? So that's exactly what we're going to do here right now, is we're going to remove the center console. It's pretty straightforward, and just kind of got to take your time. The most aggravating part is probably getting the rear armrest off, which shouldn't really be a big deal, but over the years, sometimes people have removed them, put them back on, put the wrong hardware, busted the hardware off. I've kind of seen it all at this point. And otherwise, the trim piece underneath the steering column, that one, again, not everybody takes those off the same way. Usually the metal piece that's underneath there to protect your wiring and everything else is removed and thrown away for weight reduction, or people just not caring. So let's get this center console out, and then we're going to get into the repair. Now, the repair is going to be pretty easy. We're going to do some plastic welding. So it's going to be adding some plastic material using a soldering iron, melting it down, sandpaper, getting it smooth, and then we're going to use some color bond paint. So stick around so you guys can see my method on how I do this. And the end result is going to allow me to be able to use the factory pocket that would be underneath the factory style radio with an aftermarket head unit above it. And that way everything is going to look like it belongs there, and that it isn't an afterthought and done after the fact. And beyond that, we're actually going to make that radio pocket fit flush and fit nicer than it did from factory as well, because even the factory radios didn't really look that great installed. Like, for their vintage they did, but Ford could have done it better. But I get it. Those radios were kind of multi-purpose fit, and that's just kind of the reality that we live with these old little tin cans filled with nuts and bolts. So stick around, we'll start ripping this out, and we'll get the job done. Got our weapons of choice here. Got a 5/16 bit on this drive. You can use an 8mm as well. They're pretty much cross-referenceable. And Phillips screwdriver and a little tiny flathead pick tool to get the little plastic covers off for the rear armrest. So provided all the hardware is factory in the car, this should be all we need. So let's get at it. All right, let's start with what I call the most difficult or longest part to deal with when it comes to getting your center console out, and that's this piece right here. Now, you can do it without dropping the column cover, but you could risk ripping or tearing the rubber that is attached with little tiny speed nuts that are extremely fragile. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the 2 screws underneath the column cover, drop that down. Then we got 5/16, 3 of them underneath the cover here. Okay, and that's going to allow us to pull this plastic piece off, and that's going to expose the 2 Phillips head screws that are holding the center console in over here on this side. There we go, our original under steering column piece. Here's those little speed nuts I was telling you about, and yeah, you don't want to mess those up. So column cover off, I call them covers in reality. Yeah, if you really wanted to, you could probably get a screwdriver in there, but we got to take this metal piece off since it's actually on here. 2 bolts. Here and here. There we go. So we can see some of the wiring for the alarm. The Viper, it's probably the proximity or motion sensor. I can see a little switch. You can probably dial up the sensitivity there. And yeah, there's a bunch of wiring. It works. I really don't want to touch any of it, so we're going to leave that as is. And while we're here, we'll remove this guy. So you want to take a look down here. You can see neither one of these 2 screws is attached, and the U-bracket actually is not in this car. So I'm going to be on the hunt for another U-bracket so that I can get all of that back in the way it's supposed to be. Cap off, and hopefully, what did I tell you guys? Let me get a light in there. Look at that, somebody broke one of the bolts off, probably putting the wrong thread pitch in there. Better luck over here. We do, we've got 2 bolts. Actually got some dash equivalent screws here. That is technically not the correct hardware. That's fine. And you can just kind of fold the tabs in and you'll get access to the screws here. Okay, so that's all correct. Pop this trim off. Probably just going to remove the shifter. It's going to be the easier way of doing things. Just getting this hardware off here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we got a lot of interesting stuff back here. And I don't know what it all does. I don't know. I'm gonna have to message the previous owner and see what he's got going on here. And one other thing I just noticed, we got a gray centerpiece here. So he must have done some custom work to this guy and painted it up. And whoever dyed this did a really good job because it matched the rest of the console perfectly. So you're maybe asking, well, what do you use to help fill up some of the holes? Well, there's a little bit of existing material there, which of course we're going to melt down. And then you can always grab a trusty zip tie or tie wrap. Now, don't use the cheap Harbor Freight ones. Use like a good quality Dorman one, or if you've got an old piece of interior plastic or panel laying around, you can always cut a piece of that plastic or melt a piece of it off and melt it into those respective holes. And that way you're kind of using Ford material on Ford material if you guys want to get that specific. But you know, if you got a good tie wrap, this will work and melt down just fine. So let me make some room here so that way I got the ability to work and show you guys what I'm doing to fill up these holes. All right, guys, so I think the soldering iron should be pretty warm. Oh yeah. So first things first, we want to kind of melt down everything that's sticking up and push it towards the center. If you still have a little bit of material sticking up in the end, it's fine. You're going to be able to sand it off. It's almost, plastic welding is pretty much like welding in reality. All right, you want to get decent penetration. So you just kind of keep pushing and keep melting. And just kind of end up with something like that. Okay, so there's my first pass over the holes, and you can no longer see through them. Got a little bit of zip tie left there. So it doesn't take much for this to cool down, and how you want to go about the next step is kind of up to you. I'm probably going to shave any high points off with this razor blade, and then we'll do some sanding. Now guys, if you're scared about touching, because we don't want to touch any of these sides, the textured side of things here. We're only focusing on right here. So this section down here below, and these sides right here. That's the only sides that we're going to be touching with the interior die. So we want to make sure that we don't end up making marks here. Be careful with your soldering iron that you don't accidentally touch the sides and melt them. And just take your time, be patient, and we'll probably end up using a little bit of putty to fill these up afterwards. And from there, do a final sand, and we'll be good to go for the final die. I took 80 grit on an end of a paint mixing stick and block sanded the areas down so things are relatively smooth. And I feel like I just need to go over them a little bit more on the left side. If you guys are really good on your plastic welding, you will actually possibly be in a position where you don't have any pits, and you could use like a 2-part epoxy that's sandable as well to do this. And in fact, for the size of the holes, you could probably just get away with some filler, but I don't know. I like to plastic weld, and then everything is shut and done and no longer there. So I'm gonna sand this down a little bit more. Then I'm gonna mix up some putty. It's the same putty that I use for the quarter window trim repair that I do. And we'll let that dry up. We'll get that all ready to go, and we'll just spray this little section in here, and we should have a brand new looking center console. Guys, we really don't need very much at all. Our pits are tiny, and the less that we put on, the less that we have to sand off. So in this case, I'm just going to use a razor blade to mix it up. Quick and easy. There's like hardly any pits on this side. I did a good job. Get that down there. got the little bit of filler sanded down, smoothed out, and made sure that we protected our edges and everything else so we didn't sand stuff that we didn't want to sand. Now I've used some glass cleaner just to kind of clean things up. I'm gonna rub some rubbing alcohol over this area, then we're gonna mask it off and spray up that center section, and should be looking as good as new. Okay guys, it's pretty windy outside, so I'm gonna do my spraying right here. And the reality is interior paint really doesn't throw off overspray, so we don't have too much to worry about. Here it is, Color Bond LVP Refinisher number 338 Ford Black ink. This is the closest thing you're gonna get to factory Foxbody black interior, I promise you. So that will be our final coat. I'm gonna hit just a little bit of primer because we did do some body work there, and it'll give something for the dye or the paint, whatever you want to call it, to adhere to. Of course, you can do adhesion promoter, all those things, etc., etc., etc. We all have our own processes, and for me, this works really good. This isn't a high traffic area, especially once the radio is installed. So this should give us the final finish and fit and look that we're looking for. That's pretty much it. I'm only going to do one coat of that. Again, it's just enough to seal up the little bit of filler or body work that we did. So we'll give this about 5 minutes to set up, then we'll go ahead and do a couple coats of the Color Bond. Okay guys, so here's the tricky part. Now, if you did some body work and you sanded stuff down, things are going to be pretty smooth. And although this is pretty smooth surface from factory, it is a little bit textured, and it's more textured than a textured spray would be, because you can actually get texture coating in a can that kind of gives you the illusion of texture, but that's like more what you'd have on the outer edges. So the trick that I find in here is to, instead of doing heavy coats, and you can do like, or a medium wet coat, you can do that for the first 1 or 2. And then when you're finishing stuff off, you almost just want to like mist from afar like this. And what that's going to do is kind of splatter the paint on a little bit more, and it's going to be kind of drier when it hits. So it's going to give it more of that factory-ish finish to it, if you will. So, you know, you can wait like 1 minute, 2 minutes max between the coats. This stuff actually, it advertised that it dries in 45 seconds to the touch. So even right now, we can do another one. Just kind of like, I'm a good foot away. And of course, you want to do it in a way that you're not going to splotch, right? You just want to get some texture, and do that a couple of times, and we'll see what the final result looks like. No more holes and factory black looking. Of course, you know, got to get some conditioner back on my plastics here and clean things up, but that is it. We have a what appears to be original undrilled center console. So a little bit of a process, you know, but nothing that a little bit of patience and a couple hours in the afternoon, all said and done, can't get you to accomplish. So there you have it. Hopefully this video has benefited you. If it has, you can always hit the thanks down below. You can join the channel, hit up the memberships, and subscribe and contribute that way. And that's going to be a wrap for this one. We'll do another video probably focusing on actual stereo installation components, which I'm sure a good number of people will be interested in. But we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks again.